Welcome to the show. I'm Carrie Tullifson, Olympian broadcaster and your guide to the world of RunDot.
And I'm Vanessa, your average triathlete with elite level enthusiasm and host of the RunDot podcast. Today, we are teaming up with our triathletes and our runners so that we can hopefully learn a little bit more about how sleep quality impacts us as athletes and as humans.
And I'm super pumped to have Molly Eastman on the show. Molly is the creator of Sleep is a Skill and the host of Sleep is a Skill podcast. Sleep is a Skill is a company that optimizes people's sleep, which we all love, through a unique blend of technology, accountability, and behavioral change. So Molly is the perfect expert to help us sleep our way to better running and triathlon performance.
Now, we treat this show like any good workout. So we're going to start up with a warm-up question, settle into our main set conversation, and then wind things down by having Molly answer an audience question on the cool down. Lots of good stuff. Let's get to it.
This is the RunDot podcast, the running show that brings you world-class coaching with every conversation. Let's get started with today's warm-up.
Now, Molly here, we start our show off with a warm-up question. So today's warm-up question is, what is one non-negotiable in your morning routine? Like something that you would never, ever give up, no matter how busy your life gets?
I love this one. And also, thank you so much for taking the time to have me here. It's truly my mission on the planet to share about all things sleep optimization and bring in this concept that sleep truly is a skill, muscle that we can build. So from that place, what is kind of sleep 101, if you will? It begins with how we start our day. So I love that you kicked us off like that. So for me personally, and then it has spilled over into the people that I work with, this consistency of how can we start our day paired with, so I'm kind of giving you two things in one, but how can we start our day at about the same time, 7 days a week, plus or minus around 30 minutes, and then getting ourselves physically outside, no matter where you might be on the planet, ideally to get that sun in your eyes and on your skin. So we're throwing away kind of the sunglasses and the hats and what have you just for this stretch of time throughout our mornings because of the immense power that sunlight can bring to our circadian health. But it doesn't just, people might hear circadian health and might think, sleep, naturally. Okay, great. Yes. And I think we're starting to get into the conversation how it trickles and spiders into so many aspects of our health and well-being. So it looks like the health of our, the functioning of our hormones as it relates to sleep, just the strength of a strong cortisol pulse in the morning and a strong melatonin pulse in the evening. And the fact that those two things, just to name two, are tethered to the timing and the intensity of that light exposure, that first bright light exposure, I think it really starts to move the needle on it and helps beckon this concept that the simple things can often bring wild results if done consistently and over time. So those would be my two things. And that can sometimes look weird, I can tell you. Like, my husband and I were kind of full-time travelers for about 3 years, back and forth from New York to Southeast Asia. And at different points, no matter where we might be in, like random Airbnbs or even just back in New York City, and it's freezing and it's, February, and kind of wrapping myself up like a burrito and kind of sticking my head out the window to get that light. Or even more ridiculous is I work with a ton of high stakes poker players. So I have this niche in high stakes poker, a particular type of athlete, like a cognitive athlete. And so that would often bring me to Vegas. And when you're in Vegas, you might be on the strip and in casinos designed on purpose to confuse the circadian rhythm. So, no windows, no clocks, lots of blue light, etc. And it can be a challenge to even get yourself bright light exposure. So when you're in those giant casinos, it can take some time and a commitment to walk yourself outside, find these, just how many steps you got to take to get to that light. But once you start getting that commitment, you don't want to start your day without that.
Interesting. Like, I'm wondering if you would love to come where I am right now in Minnesota when it's negative 23 at times just to get your sunlight. But yes, I agree with you. I love to get up and get out the door as fast as I can. I know we have, routines with the kids, so sometimes I don't get out before the kids get up. But
Yes.
my routine for me is to get up. I brush my teeth right away. I have to do that right away. And
Yes.
then
Yes.
I go for a run. And a lot of times I sleep in my running clothes because I think they're okay.
Okay.
Like, I know it's like one less
Yes.
thing to deal with, or I
Admit it.
lay them out so I can see
Uh-huh.
that I have
Either
them out.
way.
Yes,
That's
but
beautiful.
definitely that's one of my little tricks.
Well, I'm so glad you mentioned too the location, because where we choose to live on the globe truly does impact our health and well-being in various ways and
Mhm.
measurable ways. And I hear you. I grew up in Maine, northern Maine,
Oh,
so we're
yeah.
on the border of
You know
Canada.
it.
Yeah, went to school in Syracuse, New York, which is also freezing, and then lived in Manhattan for over a decade. And so I
Yep.
hear you on the challenge. And I will say, the location of moving to Austin, Texas was a large portion of that decision was the knowledge that, oh, I can get my
Get
sunlight,
warm.
my bright sunlight
Yes.
exposure, my ease of accessing that. And part of the bad news insight, to kind of build on what you shared, because sometimes people just cut off of this conversation altogether because, like, well, thanks for that tip, but I'm
Ah.
in, Canada, and I'm not going to be doing that. So bye. And yet,
I'm in Canada.
Okay, right? So in case anyone's checking out the conversation of them, I'm sure you've got that commitment. And yet at the same time, people might just write themselves out of that or say, well, I'll do that in the summer, but not in the winter. And yet the unfortunate kind of bad news is that because the strength of the sun in northern latitude locations in the big swaths of the stretches throughout the winter are going to be less powerful, it actually behooves us
Mhm.
not only to still get out, but to spend more time outside, because
Yeah.
there seems to be a bit of an equalizing effect. If that strength of that sun is lighter, it's less powerful, than the spending more time outside in the coast. So if we
Mm.
can take up some sort of hobbies, skiing, dog walking, whatever
Right.
happens out there, so that we can just start layering up that time. And the other thing I do want to just add to that, just to make this a lifestyle idea that could just be doable, it can be
Mm.
dosed too. So, like, my husband is always begrudging on this, kind of rule of getting the sunlight in our eyes. So at different times he'll say, but I want to, make breakfast. I want to do this other stuff. And so so the two of us will just go outside to get photons in our eyes. I'm like, you haven't even had a single photon in your eyes. So he's like, fine, I'll get my photons in my eyes. So however you
It's
can
so
make it just like
interesting.
fun. Yes, it's
Yeah.
powerful. It's really, you
Yeah.
could spend the entire podcast on the power and the physics of light. And I think we're starting to get more of that information from a quantum biology perspective and circadian biology perspective. And chronobiology is the science of time and how time affects our biology. And its most
Mhm.
simple of terms, light, because of the fact that our suprachiasmatic nucleus is located right behind, in close proximity to the eyes, it makes a lot of sense that the light dark piece is one of the primary Zeitgeber or time giver to tell the body what time it is and what to be doing when. So it's
Mm.
always sampling the environment around it for other elements too. So it's light, dark. It's also looking and feeling the temperature in the environment, because that's dynamic and shifts throughout the course of the day. So ambient temperature and our bodily temperature. Then we look at meal timing, meal type. That's another Zeitgeber time giver to the body. Then we look at exercise timing, exercise type. And that's another fascinating one, certainly in the realm of what you all are really helping to support people with. And then thought timing, which is a fascinating one, how our thoughts appear to exist on a bit of their own circadian rhythm. And we have different types of thoughts as it relates to different times of day. So much so that if people are interested in this one, there's a great study called The Mind After Midnight, where people seem to have very different types of thoughts in the wee hours of the morning. Sadly, suicidality rates going up in the wee hours of the
Mm.
morning, catastrophic thinking, black and white thinking, kind of flawed
Mhm.
logic. So the timing of these things even impacts how we're experiencing the world around us. And then lastly, drug timing. So the timing of our drugs. So that could just be as basic as caffeine, alcohol, THC, but it could get into prescriptions, supplements, psychedelics, other things that are further shifting these rhythms as well.
Well,
Oh,
this is extremely
fascinating.
crazy and complicated, and it sounds like you need like a full-on schedule for all of the things with like I don't know about you, but I like to have alarms going off so that I know what I have to do, all
Yeah.
the things.
Yeah.
So it sounds like I might need to put those in order here. But I just also love how sciencey you're getting because it warms my little nerd heart. So thank you.
Oh, good. We
Appreciate
can
that.
go deep. I love it. And
Yeah.
I'm excited that you're down to go with it because sometimes we're like, okay, like just
Well, I'll
you know,
bring
tell
it
me, and
back.
we will get
I'll
practical.
bring it
But of
back.
course, yeah,
Yeah.
thanks. Yes, we'll get out into the ether, and then we'll come back. We'll come
Yeah.
back.
Yeah,
We'll go.
sounds
Yeah.
good.
Sounds
But
good.
but I'm glad you said that too. What one of the things practically that we have people do at Sleep is a Skill is create what we call their circadian crafted day. And so your circadian crafted day, the aim is that the body loves consistency and loves count onableness, if you will. And so if we can have that consistency around what time are we waking up, as we pointed to the 7 days a week, including the weekends, the consistency of when we get our bright light exposure, when we get our drugs, when we get our caffeine, when we get our food, when we move our body. All of these things can really be wake promoting or down regulatory. So we want to kind of see and filter which things go with in which places. And that includes our thoughts too. So, emails and what have you might be more up regulatory than, and maybe scrolling and this, that, and the other versus resonance breathing or other things that are going to be more calming in our evening.
Yeah, that's amazing. Thank you for sharing all of that. For me, this question is something that's non-negotiable for me is breakfast. I'm just going to go plain and simple, and it's
Same.
breakfast. I wake up, I'm usually like starving, and so I
Yeah.
can't survive without having it immediately. And the other non-negotiable for me is hugging from my kids. I love my
Oh,
kiddos' hugs.
Love
So
that.
that's something that's part of my routine that is consistent now. I realize when they, grow up and move out, eventually I won't get my morning hugs from my kids. But for now, that's what I'm going with. So there we go. Thanks
nice.
for that
Well,
wonderful warm up.
That was beautiful.
I
It's
love
like
that.
soul nourishing, filling on two
Exactly.
levels. So
Yeah. Who
exactly.
doesn't love
Right.
breakfast and hugs and also maybe a little run and a little sun, like all of it? So
Yes.
we want to
Oh,
remind.
okay.
Yeah, I might a poet and I don't even know it. But we do want to remind all of our athletes.
That's great.
Yeah, but I want to remind all of our athletes in our audience that we want to hear from you as well. So if you've been listening to this, our answers of this question, we want you to reply and let us know. So we'll post this question to all the TriDot and RunDot social media accounts. And of course, you can answer today's warm-up question right in the comment section if you're watching on YouTube or Spotify. So wherever you interact with us, let us know what's one non-negotiable in your morning routine.
Let's go.
All right, on to the main set. Here we go. Okay, Molly, your own experience with insomnia, not being able to sleep, has made you so passionate about helping others develop better sleep skills. So, in this line of work, how much experience do you actually have? You've touched on this a little bit that you work with some poker players. But how much experience do you have with like athletes? And I know that poker has that athlete mind and they have to, I don't gamble, but I know that you have to have focus, you have to have drive, commitment, all the things that we have to have as athletes. So tell us what your background is with working with athletes and their sleep.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do think I'm glad you mentioned my background with insomnia. So in case anyone's listening and thinking like, oh, nice idea or what have you, I can just share that I did everything not to do enough
shoot.
so that it changed the course of my life. That I went through a period of insomnia over a decade ago that just so transformed how I related to my health and my well-being. And sadly, was given just about every type of sleeping pill. And, I think I'm sure the chagrin of many of the doctors that I encountered because I was actually traveling internationally at the time. And I think they wanted to be able to give more of a pathway. And yet, just for people to be aware, right now, the average doctor is getting around 2 hours of training, even out of Harvard Med. So as a result, it's very common that things are getting missed when it relates to sleep. So this is really, really crucial. And so it behooved me then in that situation to then dive down the rabbit hole to figure out what I could do to restore the workability with my sleep. And it changed the course of my life. So this is also coming from well-won knowledge along the way, and no kind of shame in the game with whatever anyone might be dealing with, because again, I was not adept at a lot of these skills. And that's why I really believe that sleep is a skill set, because I had it that I had all these labels and narratives and that it was just fixed. So I would say I'm a
Mhm.
short sleeper, I'm a night owl, it's in my genes, I'll sleep when I'm dead. And there's a tendency for many of us to kind of have it that there's a certain aptitude as it relates to sleep, and maybe not even needing to examine it because it is how it is, or resignation
Mhm.
or what have you. So I share all that because I see those things come up with athletes as well. And yeah, I appreciate you kind of pointing to the cognitive athlete of poker
Mhm.
players, and my high stakes poker players are definitely my bread and butter. So I do have quite a niche there. And at
Mhm.
the same time, what I've found is that we have quite a connection with that group and then high performers in many arenas, including maybe the impulsivity that can come and that we're aiming to train in poker, but the swing and the tilt, as they call it in the world of poker, and can show up in high performance arenas. So
Hmm.
certainly iBanking and lots of kind of stock trade and what have you. So we see a lot of that in those arenas. But as we get to specific on the ground athletes, then we've also worked with people like UFC fighters.
Mhm.
We might work with golfers. We look at long distance running, other types.
Yay!
Yay, 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 yay. So all that to say, various types of athletes. And yet, one of the cool things is that often it still boils down to a lot of, as diurnal creatures, we're meant to be active by day and at rest at night, which can fly
Mhm.
in the face of a lot of the things that we're optimizing depending on the athlete. So for poker players, to use them as an example, but it can spill over into other, areas, that they often are really experiencing what is akin to shift working and rotating shift work because they're moving around their schedule depending on tournaments, online play, etc. So we have to be really dynamic with this scheduling piece, and the same or similar rules seem to apply with different high performance athletes. So what we're looking to do is get clear of their biological peak, and so the timeline of when they're looking to perform at their best, especially, when the stakes are high.
Right.
So when we're talking about really high pressure environments and the game day, if you will. We've also had different sleep coaches on the podcast that work in with different Olympians,
Mhm.
specifically on just their sleep. And that's certainly the big moment where you've been training all this time and the pressure's on, and how do we manage sleep in situations like that? And that can be fascinating as well. So there's lots of things that we can look at there, but just to pluck one thing. Um, One of the things that's often pointed to in the case of like the Olympian example, is we can almost anticipate that for something that big, and you can apply this into your life in any big area that's important to you, that it's likely that we almost just plan that we might not have the best sleep in prep for that. And
Mhm.
oddly, in the world of sleep, which is so paradoxical, and I think often why we have the type A neurotic
Mhm.
overthinkers like me, that can often struggle because it's the one area that it has this paradoxical relationship where you can learn all these things and you can support all these things by day, but when the night comes, it's really a practice of letting go and
Mhm.
just letting the night go as it is and trust that we've kind of set the conditions for sleep to arise. Now, when the pressure is on and there's maybe anticipatory anxiety, that's where this concept of sleep banking is often discussed in high stakes environments. I'm sure you guys are all familiar. And if anyone isn't as familiar, just this concept that in prep for a big day like that or a big event, that we're taking care of our sleep to levels that maybe we aren't always, and really kind of upping our game to support that. If we know going into, even if you really didn't sleep well the night before, you can trust that the body can kind of pluck from this
Mhm.
reservoir, so to speak, of solid and reliable sleep. Now, that can just often take off a bit of the pressure, because then you know that you can still perform, even in the face of those specific immediate results, which
Mhm.
is a big deal. And then oddly, the more we set people up for that, we often see that then counterintuitively they might even get better sleep with that in the background.
Sure.
That's
It's so
really
fascinating.
fascinating.
I love it. I
Yeah.
love it too, thinking, Vanessa, before you ask the next question. like thinking of how many of us, whether you're an elite athlete or you are one that just travel the world and does these different races, like you think of all the jet lag and how you actually like
Yes.
you're not going over like a lot of pros if they have the time to go for 2 weeks and get used to the time change and all that. They are going over and racing a day or 2 days later. And so having that banking system like you're talking about is so crucial. So I love that you talk about that. I love that you talk about consistency is key more than anything, is that if we can just continue to get our good sleep, that will be able to like kick in when we need it. So yeah, go ahead, Vanessa. Sorry to step on your
Yeah,
toes.
I know it's all good because this is such great content already. So I appreciate diving right in. I'm really, really curious. When you are oftentimes like triathlons, marathon races, all of these endurance events, they often happen early in the morning, and that might
Mm-hmm.
not jive with somebody's specific sleeping schedule.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm curious if you would recommend then for someone to adjust their waking time so that it more so coincides with what will be happening on race day, like if this is a really important race for them. Because I know a lot of athletes will say, my body just isn't awake and ready to go at 6:30 a.m. because I normally wake up at 8 o'clock. And so I'm just wondering, like, if one, if that does have an impact on performance, and two, if they do need to adjust their schedule in some way, how far in advance would you suggest that they do that?
Yeah, so good. So one for handling the travel piece, no matter who they are and what their normal sleep schedule is, and then no matter what else is happening for them, kind of schedule wise or what's coming down the pike, the travel piece that I would have everyone get or attend to is downloading the Time Shifter app for any sort of, especially long haul travel. But what's so great about that is it can help you do exactly what you're speaking to of this kind of in advance shifting. So the idea that even the title is that we're living into time shifting like a verb so that you are actively shifting time even before you get on the flight or what
Hmm.
have you. And then during the flight and then after, and then the same rules apply for return. But what's cool is one, you can just manage that just for the general piece of your travel. But then they also have a new shift work app. And so in some cases, like with my poker players, we might utilize some of the shift work apps because then if they're shifting around to different tournament times, and this might apply to different athletes depending on, start times.
100%.
Right?
Yeah.
Yes, and
Yeah.
you're adjusting all over the place. Now, I will say one of the things that I do with these poker players, and it can extend across the board, is if we are able to kind of anticipate and plan and look at what's ahead on our calendar and kind of and shift that wake up time to best support the majority of those start times if possible. Sometimes it's not possible, but if we can make the more we can make this a lifestyle, and this applies even just with shift workers in general or anyone that's adjusting a lot of the peak performance times, the times where they need to be alert, then if we can make this a way of life that is going to serve us immensely. So if it is possible where we start to say, oh, you know what, if I really map out the things that are on my calendar ahead and I just start to make a lifestyle of waking up at 6 a.m., what have you, then can that catch a lot of those? And that's fantastic. The more we can do that, then the less we have to effort. But then when we
Hmm.
do have to effort, how we really relate to it is akin to that jet lag kind of protocol. So if we need to be more alert at later in the day, that can we can adjust that based on all of those zeitgebers that we were speaking to. So light dark timing, you can delay bright light exposure until a bit later into the morning or whatever time we're going for, and that will keep you that will have you be more awake and active at later into the evening than you normally would. And that can also, we can play with the light from a dosing perspective where we start getting more bright light exposure later, to keep that biological peak higher. And then we can delay meal timing as well. So the breakfast piece, I +1 for the breakfast. I am all about that. And so traditionally, what we have people do is get that first, that breakfast item right when they first wake up in alignment with their bright light and some gentle movement and all those things, or maybe more than gentle movement, depending on the person. And so we're doing all those things because those are wake promoting. But if we are looking to push people out a bit, we might push those things out a bit. So then you're kind of moving this peak, this biological kind of peak further out. And then you do the exact opposite if you're looking to move everything earlier. So that's where you would do those things first thing. And that could be more, and that is technically more in alignment with diurnal creatures, where we are looking to play with that strong cortisol pulse, but it kind of Goldilocks effect, not too high, not too low, so that we do have almost like natural coffee surging through us. And now we also can play with, kind of dosing of things like that. So we might bring in a newer one that we've been playing with is paraxanthine, and it's kind of a newer caffeine. And that one doesn't seem to be affecting adenosine in the same way, which is, a sleep pressure response that throughout the course of the day starts accumulating. So if we're using something like paraxanthine, we might be able to stretch that, still get more of that wake promoting effect with seemingly not affecting sleep quite as much as caffeine. So different little tips and tricks that we can navigate. But once you dial in, the most of the time that you've got all of these things and you're aware of the major pulls and levers that you can kind of play with, then you know exactly what to do when you need to be shifting for, different game times.
Okay,
Yeah.
I have to double back on this caffeine thing.
Yeah. Right? I know.
Like,
It's a big one.
It is because, a lot of athletes do kind of rely on their caffeine. So, like,
Yeah.
what kind of caffeine do we get in a cup of coffee? A lot of people will wake up in the morning and they go straight to coffee. Or what kind of caffeine are we getting in those goos? Like, is it all different? Is this all the same kind of things that you're talking about? Or are we looking for a specific kind of caffeine that we add to our diet
Yeah.
and our daily habits?
Great question. Yeah, I'm excited because pyraxanthine is the thinking is, and this is newer research, but the thinking is this is a downstream metabolite of caffeine. So you're getting some of the thought is that you're getting some of the benefits of caffeine without the sort of physicality effects. So the jittery effects, the heart racing effects, and yet you're getting still that kind of cueing in from cognition, even just, if you need to get some emails done or whatever. But then also when we're really talking about performance, then there could be some benefits by layering in. This is a specific ingredient that we're starting to see show up so much so that it's starting to catch the attention of even very mainstream thought leaders like Kim Kardashian, who are starting to now to have a big stake, in certain, kind of ingredients and things to come. So point
Interesting.
is that what we're seeing is, can you search for different ways that you could experiment with something like paraxanthine and see if that could give you a little bit of an edge without all the other maybe deleterious effects of caffeine when we overdo it. And so you will need to search for that specific ingredient. You can find it in a few different ways. There's different um, drinks that are making it and including in it, different supplements that you can get that are starting to have that all blended in, because it's within the last, I'd say, 2 or 3 years, has started to really explode onto the scene for more, biohackers or what have you. But even as mainstream as
Interesting.
like the Amen Clinic and other groups that are starting to bring that into a lot of their supplements and
Yeah.
performance enhancing options.
Well, and that's
So,
the big thing for me is performance enhancing is I'm 100% drug-free athlete. So anyone
Yeah,
in the running world, make sure all of this stuff is good, especially with USADA or USAT, like all of that stuff. You have to make sure that that
totally.
is good. And we do in my world, we don't want anyone taking stuff they shouldn't be taking.
Totally, 100%. Exactly. And if people want to learn more about caffeine, I mean, there's some like Michael Pollan has gone to town on researching things like
Yep.
caffeine and the drug effects there. And so, however you cut it, we're looking at there's certain things that we could take in, but what I often see is I think how rarely people quite realize just how much these what can sound as like the boring stuff can
Hmm.
really show up in their sleep results. And what I'm excited about is that wearables, I think, are starting to disrupt this. So, for instance, one of the things I think is one of getting a lot of kind of talking points or time is that meal timing, that we're starting to see how much of a difference that can make for our sleep quality,
Huh.
including our HRV. So, if people are tracking heart rate variability, and just what a difference that can make of having your last bite of food a decent amount earlier than a lot of people maybe traditionally had been experimenting with, and seeing how much that can lower heart rate throughout the course of the night, boost heart rate variability, lower respiratory rate, how many breaths you're taking per minute while you're sleeping. And then, of course, lower body temperature, and then commonly help support blood oxygen levels. So, if people are dealing with respiratory based sleep disturbances like sleep apnea, upper airway resistance syndrome, how we can see that be a real thing you can play with if you know you have big things on your calendar for the next day, that you can thoughtfully bring that in. And I heard rumblings that Whoop was looking at some of the results that they were seeing between two different groups of participants wearing the Whoop band, that 2 hours before bed having last bite of food versus 4 hours before bed having last bite of food. And my understanding is it's quite not released quite yet, but seems to be very clear that this 4 hour before bed last bite of food group seems to perform quite better and different metrics of sleep. Your face.
I have a
I'm
milkshake every night, Molly. I have since I competed. I have a
Got
little
it.
tiny 8 ounce, maybe 6 ounces of, ice cream and a little milk, and then I go to bed.
Yeah,
I'm
okay.
probably
Well, that's
doing it
hysterical.
all wrong.
Yeah. Well, okay. So another thing, the one thing that's really fascinating is that Dexcom, one of the creators of the continuous glucose monitors, CGMs, and Aura have kind of partnered up to the tune of around 75 million to really help demonstrate just how much our metabolism and sleep results are interconnected.
Mm.
And what that's looking like on the ground is giving access to, now we can buy over the counter continuous glucose monitors, which is really exciting. No prescription needed in the United States anyway. And then also in many other countries, you can get it even more easily. But what I would say is, with the demonstration of putting those on, and I would suggest anyone listening, I would love to see across the globe, everyone just doing
Mm.
this, even for a stretch of time, if you could just do it for like 1 month's time. And so you put that on, and now it's overlaying on your Aura Ring data so that you're getting to see the spiking and the crashing that might be happening by day. And if that's happening, just about anything that's happening by day is often getting mirrored in your nights. So whatever is going
Huh.
on by day is often getting mirrored in your nights. So if we're stressing out, kind of on that nervous system overdrive, which I've been there, I understand.
Mhm.
And yet, if that is what's happening by day, we're often going to see in the evenings, those metrics show that. And that same rules seem to apply with glucose. And we're looking for kind of rolling hills versus a spike and crash and spike
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
crash. Because the other tangible, real world impact of this is that one of the most common reasons people come our way is that they're frustrated with wake ups, and they're just
Yeah.
annoyed. Why do I keep waking up at 2, 3, 4 a.m.? Or maybe now I'm up and I'm just up and I can't fall back asleep. And
Yep.
so for that group, there's many reasons for wake ups, tons and tons of reasons for wake ups. So I don't want to blanket the statement, but a common reason that I often find people not being quite aware of or starting to just get out there is that instability in glucose. And then when we show it on the continuous glucose monitor, so say that like milkshake, maybe it's fine, but maybe maybe we're seeing a possible spike and a possible crash. But the other thing about it is just the process of digesting. Now, thankfully, you've got a kind of more liquid based element. Depends on the ingredients and what else is going on there. But hopefully it's more easy to digest. And so there might be benefits there. But anything that we're putting into the digestive system is kind of turning on those digestive clocks. And here's what's really interesting. One of our top podcast episodes with Dr. Sachin Panda out of the Salk Institute, who wrote the Circadian Code, which I highly recommend people check out. And it's around largely, and other topics, but largely meal timing and how that impacts our circadian health and our sleep results. So what he found is that when we turn on the pancreas, which is kind of one of the processes for digestion, then it seems to be at odds with our ability to create sufficient melatonin. So it's impacting our full surge of melatonin in the evening. So that meal timing has a very real world impact and effects. Now, say if we eat something really egregious, it's whatever, we have giant pizza and, all the things. And so we're spiking. And then, so now the pancreas is turned on. Now we're giving this whole body extra digestive load. So all this blood flow is going to the stomach. It's incredibly taxing, metabolically taxing, and it's taking away for our ability to deal with one of the first things that happens in sleep, which is glymphatic drainage with a G versus the lymphatic drainage with an L. So glymphatic drainage with a G is this kind of deep cleansing of the brain. But if the body is kind of split on having to tend to digestion, which can heat up the body, which is contrary to what we're trying to do, we're trying to lower body temperature before bed. So things are kind of at odds, and you're not able to get in access some of that rich glymphatic drainage in quite the same way. And now, if we did have that big spike from that pizza or whatever, now we're trying to sleep that off. Heart rate's up, HRV, heart rate variability is down, respiratory rate is up because now we're breathing more quickly to handle all of this. And then what commonly happens is a crash at some point throughout the course of the night, especially because REM, rapid eye movement, is really metabolically taxing as well. So the energy that it takes for that, we might see that crash. And when we see that crash, it's kind of a stress response to the body. And now with that stress response, now you're awake and it might be harder to get back to sleep with that surging of kind of those stress chemicals, if you will.
Wow.
Okay. You're blowing my mind with every sentence that you're speaking. I have a couple of things that I want to just put a pin in for a second. So one, you were talking about glymphatic drainage. Now, just for other listeners, like you had referred to the increase of adenosine throughout the day. And is that not related as we increase the adenosine throughout the day? The whole purpose of this glymphatic drainage is to decrease the adenosine. Is that correct?
Great question. Yeah. So this adenosine, often how I describe it to clients is if you think of sort of an hourglass, and when you first wake up in the morning, it's pretty empty because hopefully you had some great sleep, and now all this adenosine is kind of dumped out, all that sleep pressure, and so all the sand is gone. And now, just by virtue of living throughout the course of the day, all the sand is starting to come into that hourglass. Now, there's different things that we can be doing that might impact the way the body experiences all that sand. But if everything's working out great, then you're actually helping to build that up, almost kind of like kids. Like we're tiring ourselves out, we're working out, we're doing all the things we're talking about, and then all that sand is getting nice and high, so to the point that that sleep pressure is kind of overflowing. And then when you do get into bed, then you effortlessly kind of fall asleep and stay asleep because now you've got so much sleep pressure. However, there might be things that we're doing that are impacting that, so we're not quite overflowing by the time we get to bed. Some things can be caffeine, can make the brain think that all that sand is in there, or other drugs, stimulants can also impact that. And so even though all that sand's there, the brain's like blind to it and can't see it. Or then you can literally physically be dumping out some of that, not physically, but you can quite literally think about it, that you're getting rid of some of that adenosine if you're taking too many rich and long naps and too late into the day, because then you're dumping some of that out. And so by the time your normal bedtime comes, it's not overflowing. And the other piece is if we move around our bedtime wake time a lot, then the body doesn't quite know what time we're needing to fill all this up to. And then it might be different points when you're exhausted really early because you got up really early, but then this other time you got up really late. So now you're not at all tired at your normal bedtime. So there's all of these ways with adenosine. Now, adenosine is part of that process too, of that restoration that's going on with sleep. So we are kind of cleansing, clearing all of that, and even more so, or in addition, we're also cleansing all of this kind of brain-based waste, if you will, throughout the brain. And what's really fascinating is the brain will actually shrink in size throughout this process. And this fluid, to make room for this fluid to kind of super soak the brain and let all of that waste drip away. And this is actually why positional sleep therapies are kind of coming into vogue to a certain extent, but it's also been around. We see what appears to be evidence of even like Egyptian beds and what have you having a bit of an incline so that you can be at more of an angle to let all of that kind of flow through. Now, that's not the only reason. That's one reason why we are thinking about doing this now. But in the past, one of the other theories is that that would have supported things like sleep apnea or snoring, because, of course, when you're sitting more straight up, then gravity is helping you and you're not pushing their tongue back into your airway. But with lymphatic drainage with a G, yes, it is that cleansing and kind of clearing. But then we're also dealing with things like amyloid beta plaques. We're dealing with tau. We're dealing with this cleansing that does appear to have correlations with some of the things that we see with neurodegenerative disorders. So Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, dementia. Now, historically, we didn't think that there was a ton that we could do preemptively to help with this, but it looks like there could be correlations with poor sleep, not accessing reliably that lymphatic drainage, and potentially some accumulations of this brain-based waste and the hardening and the plaques of this. So we really want to help facilitate this where possible. Now, other things that help this are temperature. So when we talk about sleeping in a cool environment, and the suggestions are actually a lot cooler than a lot of people are sleeping, between 60 and 67 degrees Fahrenheit. That's out of the National Sleep Foundation. That's your ambient temperature. But I also see when people layer in cooling mattress toppers. So like an 8 sleep, chilly sleep, or more newly the Orion, which is just kind of launching. All of these things, that's one of the few things that I'll often see make a measurable change overnight in people's metrics and then experience of sleep, because this also can play into menopausal symptoms and perimenopause and menopause, and then hot flash. Even hot flashes, 8 sleep has a hot flash mode that it will detect if you're starting to really overheat and adjust things dynamically.
That's
Wowzers.
amazing.
So many things.
Yes.
So
Sign
many
me
things.
up.
Yeah, right? I know. Yes. Please.
Okay. One other thing that you had mentioned in terms of REM sleep. So, first, okay, there's multiple things here. One, can you describe the different stages of sleep for people who may not be aware?
Sure.
And two, when you had said that REM sleep is more metabolically taxing, I'm curious, like a lot of endurance athletes and triathletes, they suffer from like energy deficiency. And so I'm wondering if the body is in a protection mode when it is deprived of energy that it requires for the training and all of the things that we do throughout the day. Will it protect itself and not go into REM sleep to allow for that energy to be utilized in other metabolic processes and that sort of thing? So those are my 3 questions, or 2, I
Great.
guess. Yeah.
Okay. Yes. Okay. Let me see if I can answer. So, one, the simplest way I think for people to think about the sleep stage classifications, and quick tangent, if people are tracking, just know that one of the least accurate sets of data on most of our hand and wrist based trackers are the sleep stage classifications. So, in case people are like losing it because they're saying, "Oh no, I'm not getting enough of deep or REM or whatever." Now, it's not to kind of discount fully, but just to know that out of everything you're looking at, that is the most of a leap that is being made, because one of our best ways to understand what brain state you're in is through brain state tech, and we don't quite have that set up right now. So they're kind of extrapolating and looking at different signs, but they're getting a lot better. So having said that, deep sleep, and if you look at sort of the architecture of sleep throughout the course of the night, the easiest way to think about it is if you cut it kind of in half. On the first half of the night, we're going to see more of a penchant of going through deep sleep for most people, and that there's lots of theories on why is that. Does that make that the most important, et cetera, et cetera? It doesn't seem to quite be accurate that it's the most important, but it is does seem to be the first thing that we tend to go through. And then that's when the body gets into this really cooling state. So our body temperature goes down, our heart rate goes down, everything relaxes, and then the brain can then shift into those deep delta waves. But then as we start changing throughout the course of the night, and this is oscillating into some of that light sleep that people might say, oh, I have so much light sleep. And it's not a throwaway. It's still definitely supportive. We need that. And yet it helps us to kind of shift over into those different states. And then in the second half of the night, that's when we are shifting more into REM, so rapid eye movement. And REM is also very important. So it can't just be, chucked out as opposed to, well, I want my deep sleep and deep sleep centric. Sometimes I see people really fixating on deep sleep, but all of these are important. And REM, you can almost think is like your inner therapist to a certain extent, and it does other things, but this is a big part of it from kind of emotional regulation, well-being, filing of and making sense of the world around us and what makes sense to kind of mull over from the day before or other big traumas, etc., and to help work those things through and decide what to prune and what to toss. And now that's in the second half of the night. Now, one of the things I said about that metabolically taxing piece with REM, things start to shift in REM sleep because now we start slowly warming up the body. And then there's questions of, is that almost to prepare us to kind of enter the waking world again? Because we can imagine that it'd be quite jarring. If anyone's woken up during deep sleep, you don't want to be woken up. You're just like, okay, I'm not done. I need more time. And you're very in this rich, deep sleep versus REM as the body. If you are looking at EEG readouts of what's going on in a person's brain when they're in REM, if you weren't sitting right next to them and seeing them sleeping, if you're in another room and you just see these brain states, it looks like they're awake. It looks like they're watching TV or something, because they are kind of watching TV, or we are all watching TV of some sort, which is our different dreams or different things that we're processing. So there's a lot of activity happening that isn't quite there in the same way during deep sleep. So all of that is a little taxing, and then your heart rate can come up slowly. This is why we often see certain sleep disorders more active during REM. So meaning if there's respiratory-based sleep disorders, so sleep apnea, snoring, bruxism, upper air resistance syndrome, all of these might flare up a bit more in REM, and to the point that they have REM dominant sleep apnea or REM dominant kind of respiratory based sleep disorders. And because of that, so now they're breathing faster. There's more of a likelihood for some of those apneas. And then as the body temperature is kind of going up a bit, that can prepare us to start shifting over to now we're going to be awake. And also cortisol is setting the scene for cortisol to start rising. But if we're dealing with a lot of stress or other things at play, we might have too much cortisol starting to surge at the wrong times. And now we're getting up and or having those early morning awakenings and not able to kind of balance and manage that nervous system. So that's kind of a breakdown of the two and a little bit more about each one and that metabolically taxing piece. But I think I might have missed the second part of the question. If I didn't answer that, just let me know.
Yeah, no, that's really fascinating. I was just curious if the body protects the energy that it has if there is a lack of energy based on, too much training or not enough fuel that an athlete is taking in, which is this massive. It seems like such a complicated situation because you're saying, like, as you said at the very beginning, you want your daily pattern to your daily pattern might inform how you're sleeping at night. And so if we're not getting what we need during the day, then how are we going to get what we need during the night? And so I was just curious if the energy deficiency that might exist might cause the body not to go into REM state to preserve the lack of energy that it's receiving for other like hormone production and all the other activities that have to occur.
No, it's a great question because this is where the fascinating part of the kind of puzzle of sleep lies for sleep optimization some people might hear, oh, sleep optimization, what? So you just tell people to put their phones away? But, so when you really get into the weeds of it, there's so much more at play because, just at its core, when we are tracking our sleep, it's kind of like a nightly report card, not just of how that sleep is faring, but also our health and well being as a whole. So you're 100% right if our mitochondrial health is not to the level that we'd like it to be, that's going to show up in our sleep results. So we need energy to sleep well. So that's why what sleep is a skill, one of the things that we're often doing is supporting energy production. So mitochondria is at the crux of a lot of things that we're supporting to be able to sleep well at night. And that might also look at some other things that aren't always tested as regularly that I would like to see that we look at quite a bit. Things like leptin levels. And so energy being able to be derived from balanced leptin is one example of things that I think get often overlooked. And if you don't have enough of those energy reserves, so say, and this can happen, I see a lot with athletes, is when we might have been overtraining and underfueling and just kind of running ragged. And now we're dealing with low leptin. And so if we're dealing with low leptin and not enough body fat, et cetera, then the energy reserves aren't quite there in the same way. So it can be hard to tap into that rich restorative sleep. So and then you get into kind of a snowball because now your sleep isn't as great as it could be, and now you're dragging. But now then you want more coffee and you want all the things, and now you just right. And it can be so easy to get into that. So that's why I believe this concept of sleep being a skill is so important because there's so many things we might be doing that we have no idea. I mean, I know that's what was happening for me. I had no clue that the management of my days and nights were just massively impacting my experience of life and how recovered I felt after, each night.
This is we like to do a cool down. We ask one of our guests a question from the audience. So this is the question that has been submitted from one of our athletes, and she writes. When I have a long and hard training session, I notice that I don't sleep well that night, even if I train earlier in the day. Why does this happen, and what can I do to improve my sleep so I still get the recovery that I need?
Oh, such a good one. Yes. Well, one, I'll two-part answer. So, just in case anyone didn't see this, I think it was really, really helpful. I know I keep mentioning Whoop, but there was a great Whoop study that landed in Nature, one of the top tier journals, and they had thousands of participants. And one of the things that they found as far as exercise timing and its impact on sleep was it shook out to be about 4 hours before bed, kind of ceasing any high intensity training. I hear them too. They're like, even when it's early. But just in case anyone doesn't know this, 4 hours before bed, kind of stopping with any of that high intensity, really being supportive of many aspects of sleep. And then on a more conservative level, there are a few things that were impacted by sleep if you went even earlier back, about 6 hours before bed, ceasing any of that high activity exercise. So could be a study worth looking at just because there were so many participants and all wearing actively trackers to get more information about their sleep. So aiming to factor that in for all of us. And that doesn't mean that you can't still have some gentle exercise in that 6 to 4 hours before bed too, but just being aware of that. Now, one of the cool things that we see, so I work with a lot of people also on optimizing HRV, heart rate variability, even if they aren't athletes. But one of the biggest levers to supporting heart rate variability, and this impacts everyone because heart rate variability is really a metric of recovery. So there's an argument that that could be one of a very powerful metric for us to take a look at just for the experience of sleeping well and feeling recovered the next day. Now, a strategy that we often have people play with on purpose is knowing that, say, you have one of your strong endurance runs or endurance training and that you're strategically putting that into your week in a way, and hopefully being somewhat mindful, and hopefully not fully at the effect of your wearable data, but hopefully it's on a decent day. We've got energy reserves to kind of pull from, and now you train in a strong and powerful way, more so than most of the rest of your week. you can almost guarantee that the next day is going to be exactly what they saw, is that kind of drop in many areas. And many of like my Whoop people will say, I'm in the red, like after these things, or Aura, it's like, oh, it's yelling at me and what's going on. But one of the cool things that we see is if people do this and then they give themselves enough recovery time thereafter, and they don't just right back hit the pavement and whatever, but at least just gentle recovery time, then commonly we can start to see PRs or improvements in HRV if they're starting to bring those things in further down in the week. If we give ourselves the following day, so then the second to third day, we commonly see that improve. So what I'm trying to say is if we're taxing ourselves, this is where becoming a pro at recovery becomes all the more important. And so some of my top athletes, they are like the best at recovery. It's amazing. And if anyone is struggling with this, and I guess what I want to also put in there too, is to maybe not be fully afraid and maybe anticipate that it might be that way if you are taxing yourself on purpose, but then the body is saying, I need that recovery time thereafter, and that you're not doing that every other day, that you're just kind of dropping that in intelligently in your weekly training plan. But then there's a book called The Power of the Downstate that I like to recommend for people because it plays with sleep and heart rate variability, which we don't have a lot of books that do that. So this has been helpful so that it can look at lots of different techniques for down regulation. And it doesn't mean you have to be in a lotus position the whole next day. You could do do some maybe light zone 2 or, maybe strength training can still often serve as kind of recovery to a certain extent. Knowing your body, learning your body, and gentle walking and that sort of thing. But it's not taking it to zone 4, 5 for extended periods of time that very next day or right after. And so what I want to leave in is, and this is another way too to think about stress, because I also have a lot of people tracking daytime stress on their trackers and they get really stressed out, ironically, about all the stress. And so I share that both of these things, what we're trying to do is not avoid stress or poor recovery days, because they're all going to happen every now and again. Instead, we want to train resiliency. And part of that training of resiliency is really powerful recovery techniques. And so that's what we want to kind of play into in this sort of like accordion model. So when you tax yourself, then we're relaxing ourselves. Look at all our poet ways of being. Tax yourself, relax yourself. Okay,
Yes.
I'm using that. Okay. But so I hope that helps for that question. And if I didn't explain it properly, you can always reach out to me at Sleep is a Skill, on social or on the website or what have you. It truly is my mission on the planet to help support as many people with their sleep. I don't want to see people go in the direction that I felt like I dodged a bullet, because I could have been on these really heavy sleeping pills and all the things for a long stretch of time. And sadly, I do see so many people go that route, and close family members and other people really close to me I've seen become really hooked on pharmaceuticals and needing the really, really big time drugs to be able to sleep each night. And it just doesn't have to go that way.
Yeah. Well, we will get you back because we have a lot to dig
Love
into.
that.
But thank you for your time, Molly. This has been amazing. And now I'm going to go
Had a
sleep.
blast.
I might try to cut out my milkshake though.
Thanks for listening to the RunDot podcast. Help us out by leaving a rating and review on your listening platform of choice. For more opportunities to learn from our coaches, check out our YouTube channel and follow RunDot Training on social. Ready to train with us? Head to rundot.com and get started for free. Until next time, happy training.